Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for our 30 on Thursday webinar, Your Employee Directory, the Center of Your Digital Workplace. Just a little bit about Protiviti before we get started. We provide consulting solutions in finance, technology, operations, data analytics, governance, risk, and internal audit to our clients through our network of more than 40 offices in over 20 countries. Our full-service software solutions team provides consulting and on-demand support for SharePoint, Office 365, Salesforce, Nintex, Sitecore, and more. Our 30 on Thursday webinar series is a bi-weekly webinar series where we talk all things enterprise content management and software services. Our next webinar will be on February 22nd, where we will be talking about best practices for protecting your organization from security breaches in Office 365 with SharePoint MVP Antonio Mayo. You can register for that webinar and see our full event schedule at ecm.protiviti.com/events. Protiviti is hosting our very own Office 365 and SharePoint specific conference this spring in McLean, Virginia. We're actually offering 50% off for everyone on today's webinar. This offer is valid until next Friday, February 23rd. If you're interested in registering for this event, you can use 30T50 when registering. The website is procollabcon.com. We will be offering Office 365 workshops, Nintex workshops. Our keynote speaker is Dux Raymond Sy this year, and we're also having 3 other Microsoft MVPs as speakers. We do offer CPE credit for this event, so 6 CPE credits per workshop and 7 CPE credits for the main conference day. So if you're interested in attending this event, visit procollabcon.com, use the promo code 30T50 when registering, or you can reach out to me after the webinar and I can answer any questions that you have. Today's session is being recorded. You can access the recording of today's session and see all of our past webinar recordings on our YouTube channel. For questions during today's presentation, please insert them in the question window of the GoToMeeting toolbar, or you can live tweet us your questions using the hashtag 30T_Hyperfish. We will be saving all the questions until after Jeremy's presentation today. So today's presenter is Jeremy Thake with Hyperfish. I am Julia Marple and I will be moderating today's session. So Jeremy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Julia. And it's nice to hear that you've got Dux Raymond Sy presenting. For those of you that haven't seen him present, I would highly recommend attending that conference because he is a great presenter, full of energy and does a lot with customers and the community. He's always got interesting stories to share of how Office 365 can help. So hopefully you feel the same once you see my presentation today. Julie, can you see my screen with the title slide up right now?
I see your desktop with the mountain background.
Not what I was expecting. Let me just change that one to...
Yep, I can see it now.
Okay, great, thank you. So today what I wanted to kind of talk about is the employee directory that you can kind of build on yourself, but also take advantage of the out-of-the-box experiences, both in Office 365 and also inside of SharePoint Server and SharePoint Online. This is something that came up a lot as we were talking about our own product, Hyperfish, which helps to kind of complete and update your profiles for an automated kind of bot experience. But today I really wanted to drill in more on the employee directory aspect. And part of that is that there's lots of reasons why an employee directory is popular inside of organizations. And the most common scenario that we see from kind of the surveys that we've done and the discussions we have with customers around the profile information driving the employee directory is that they're looking for someone to either call, email, or instant message within their organization. And they want to do it using kind of different types of understandings of how they find someone. So for instance, they might not know their name, but they might know the department they're in, or they might know what they look like, or they might know that they're based in a particular office. But it could also be pivoted where you might want to just understand that, okay, there's 3 people that I'm going to be in this meeting with. I'm on a Microsoft Teams or a Skype for Business call, and I just want to get a good understanding about where they are in the business, who their reporting line is, maybe how important they are, depending on how high up they are in the organizational chart. But then you also might be scheduled a meeting in person, and you need to go meet them at their desk inside of the building, and you need to know exactly where they are in the office. So the employee directory can be used for simple things like that people take for granted, maybe where they've come from other organizations where the employee directory was there and full and complete. Some of the interesting things that we found more recently, though, is that in the case of an emergency, who the fire warden is on a particular floor or your floor, or maybe who the first aider is other common scenarios that we see from an employee directory perspective. And this is not just important for new hires, as a lot of people just assume with discovering the organization, but it can be for people that are maybe changing roles and they're not familiar with the division they've been moved into, or because there's been a whole new team introduced, or maybe a restructure. And the employee directory is a good way to kind of understand how things have been changed and who the roles and responsibilities are. And then I guess lastly, the one that we hear more and more now is this notion of finding the people with the specific skills or expertise within the organization for projects that are running. Maybe they've got a project where they're the project manager on the construction of a new building inside of a new state, and they're basically looking for people with experience on installation of ceilings. And they want to understand, out of all of the contractors, who has those skills for the project manager to pull into meetings with potential bidders that are going to be doing the ceiling inside of the construction. And so having that kind of skill search inside of the employee directory, not just for internal people, but also to external users that need to keep the profile up to date in the system as well, it is really, really critical inside of an organization. There is a little bit of kind of confusion sometimes about what's available where, and a lot of people don't realize there's some really kind of powerful ways that you can get around inside of Office 365 and on premises with SharePoint Server to discover these things. And the key to this really is that the core amount of that profile information is stored inside of Active Directory, which is basically what we've kind of known and loved for a long time in IT, where when you turn your computer on and you put in username and password, it uses the Active Directory server to go validate that your password and username is correct. But Active Directory, or AD, is more than just that. It also stores other attributes about people, such as their job title, such as their manager, such as their department, and their office location, for instance. And these are the things that, for a long time, if I was in, for instance, Outlook on my desktop, or maybe I was in Skype for Business, it would be sourcing that people information that shows up across those experiences from AD. If you're using SharePoint profiles actually crawl up all that information that is inside of Active Directory, but there's this ability to have additional SharePoint properties for each user profile. And so a lot of organizations create additional properties. As an example, we were talking to a customer recently that used cost center code as a property they wanted to store against every single profile inside of the organization, so that when you are searching for people, maybe you're a project manager and you're looking for people within particular cost centers, so you're not doing cross billing, having the ability to refine your search based on that cost center is really important from finding the right people, not just the people with the right skills, but finding the right people in the right cost centers that you can use as your project manager. And that's why they did that with their cost center. Now, as I mentioned, Outlook is kind of the most common place that we see people going. And typically when I'm on Outlook desktop, there's an address book I can launch, and there's a rudimentary search there that will work on first name, last name. And there's a more advanced search button that you can click to jump in and see more. But interestingly, we saw that the second most popular one is with Skype for Business. With Skype for Business, when you're kind of looking for contacts within your organization, essentially you can type their name and it will return that person. I can instantly go and instant message them, or click the call button, or maybe a video call button. But from a search perspective, you can't really type in there and refine that to what skills have they got, or where's their office located, because the search aspects of those two approaches aren't that advanced and aren't doing the indexing and search criteria on those particular properties. It's purely on very simple things like forename and display name. Now, for the astute people inside of OneDrive and SharePoint Online, you may have noticed that there's been some improvements in what we call the people cards and the people experience across Office 365. And if I just kind of spin over to another dashboard here and just go inside of my environment and have a look. When I'm inside Outlook, you may notice in the browser and also in the desktop client that there's this people in the bottom left along with the mail and the calendar and your tasks. And when I click on the people, it's going to show me everyone in the organization, but it prioritizes it based on who I'm contacting the most and who I'm engaging with in email, who I'm engaging with in Microsoft Teams. And when I hover over, say for instance, Aaron there, you'll notice that this contact card comes up. Now, over time, you'll see this contact card not only show right now as it does in Outlook and OneDrive and inside of the SharePoint user interfaces, but also in things like Microsoft Teams, inside of Planner, inside of Dynamics, inside of all of the suite of applications you can launch from up here in your application launcher. And it's an effort that an engineering team in Redmond is actively working on to improve where this contact card shows. And the idea is that they want this consistent user experience across all of the products, rather than each product implementing their own contact cards. And the benefit of this is quite quickly, I can see here that they're in the corporate office, there's their phone numbers and their emails. I can see who they report to. I can click in here and jump into Dan Park's card if I would like. I can also see emails that I've had between Aaron, and I'm logged in as my administrator at the moment, so obviously my admin isn't doing too much from an email perspective. But if I click on the show more here at the bottom, what you may notice now is that originally this card bounced you over to Delve, and now what it's doing is it's actually pulling you into a third of the page experience contact card. And so this is a similar type of information, but what you'll notice is that I have the ability to see more of the attributes that are stored in Active Directory, but also some of these that are stored inside of SharePoint profile properties as well. And you'll notice that I can even kind of go in and copy those things, because they realize that there's a lot of scenarios where I'm just grabbing this information and pasting it into emails, or maybe I'm having communications on Teams or other products where I want to grab that information very easily, inject that into the conversations I'm having. And then nicely, one thing I always get asked for is, hey, Jeremy, where's the best place to get an org chart? And the answer is really is here. This allows me to go kind of 4 levels at any point in time wherever I navigate inside of this. But it also allows me to see their direct reports and other colleagues of Aaron, as well as that management chain up through the organization. And again, I can kind of deep dive in here and jump around and see all that information, and then kind of pivot through not just the stuff in AD, but things like schools and educations, past projects, and even their skills. So in this case, this type of information is not stored in AD, it's in SharePoint user profiles, this About Me tab. But I can also go through and see what files that Aaron is working for. And a nice feature that was announced at Ignite conference last November was that I can actually do a search just on Aaron's files that he has worked on across not just his own OneDrive that's shared with other people, but also across SharePoint sites that he's collaborating on as well, and filter those by particular file types as well. So there's some really nice scenarios there for discovering people out of the box using these people cards, and you don't just have to come to this people tab to get there. If I'm inside of my email, for instance, and I hover over anyone that's in the 2-line inside of these scenarios, I can see their cards here and see the information, see who I'm communicating with, and go in and see show more. So if I was maybe sending an email to Aaron, when I hover over Aaron and go into the contact cards, I see this information here, and I can even pull up that full 1/3 card on the right hand side, get the information I need about where they're working, and then jump back into my email and start collaborating. So there's some really nice things you can do with the contact cards out of the box. Now, as I mentioned before, Delve is also something that was driven for a long time when it was announced, and was actually mentioned inside of Satya Nadella's book, Hit Refresh, as an example of how the Microsoft Graph can be used to really get more power out of what's going on inside of Office 365 and the users inside it. Now, from this perspective, I kind of just really want to point out that, you know, Delve really hasn't had much in the way of improvements from a UI perspective in a while. And if I go over to just lost my mouse from the screen sharing. If I go over to my browser here and look at my Delve experience, I'm going to have to type it into here. Oh, there you go, my mouse has come back. Is if I go into my Delve experience, this hasn't really improved in a while, and it's very more document-centric than it is people-centric. But the nice thing about Delve is that the people search up the top here, if I can drill into those people like Aaron here, and this gives me a bit more than what the thirds on the right-hand side does in terms of I get this org chart on the left-hand side. It's a little bit different to the one on the thirds card, and honestly, I kind of prefer the one that pops up on the right-hand side because it gives me a little bit more information. But I still do see things like the skills and education and past projects that person's worked on. But you can see this is more document-centric in the way that it's showing me documents that people who work with Aaron are working on, as well as what Aaron's working on here. And this is kind of the evolution of what was the My Site as a profile page. But I can actually come in here and search for people too. So if I was searching for Justin, you can see here it's returning me results. It's showing me information about Justin there, and if there was more than one people inside of that. I can do things like search for people that have skills with particular things in here as well. But I guess the feedback that we've had on Delve is that it's not really evolved a lot in the last 18 months, and there doesn't seem to be any roadmap for that particular service. And speaking to kind of CVPs like Jeff Teeper, the way they kind of talk about Delve is the first example of highlighting the power of the Microsoft graph, and not necessarily going to be fully evolved moving forward. And so then the other aspect from a people discovery or employee directory aspect is Microsoft Teams, which is kind of the evolution of where Skype for Business and kind of a compete against things like Slack are in the market. Now the benefit with Microsoft Teams is that there's a very big driving force there on building this and being competitive against things like Slack that's already in the market. And what you'll see here is that I can have conversations with people like Justin, much like you would have done in Skype for Business. And I can see their organizational chart here as well. Now, this is similar to what you see in that thirds view, but it is Microsoft Teams engineering kind of take on this. And so I can navigate through the different users, and I can launch chats with Lawrence directly in here to go into Microsoft Teams, as well as see what files that they've maybe shared with you and just general activity you've had with those particular users. But there's an additional bot that just got launched at kind of midway through January, which I've talked about on our blog at blog.hyperfish.com, which essentially allows you to ask questions like, who is Aaron? If I spell Aaron right. But even if I don't spell Aaron right, it's using those mnemonics to actually come back with Aaron's details. And I can even do additional things here and say, okay, well, who is Aaron's manager? And it'll kind of put out that quote and allow me to drive in and have those kind of conversations. But the who bot allows me to do additional things. So I can actually go in not just and ask who is, but I can ask who knows about particular products or projects or topic areas. I can ask who works with particular people. So I can ask for, and this isn't just peers, it also this notion of using the Microsoft graph to understand what kind of documents Aaron might collaborate with, as well as like checking who people's direct reports are. But the nice thing here is there's a lot of scenarios where I might forget the person's name, forget where they work, forget who they look like, but I know I've had a conversation about maybe a particular topic here. So I could say, who have I emailed about SharePoint employee directory, or who was I in a meeting about the employee directory, or who have I messaged or I instant messaged about Dynamics 365, and it will list those people because it's using the Microsoft graph to give us that kind of intelligence. So this who bot is available, and it will be available as an app here, and you can actually go and grab that from in the store. And if you basically just type in who, it'll come up here, and you can just install it. I've already installed it, so that's not going to show up. So Teams is doing a lot to kind of integrate the people experience directly in with the org charts, but this WhoBot is just another way of querying those things in your experience. So if you're rolling out Microsoft Teams, this is another great way of having some engagement and getting people to be sticky in Teams and come back because of that WhoBot experience. Now, the other additional way is something that's been around in SharePoint since kind of 2010, and really kind of even in 2007 was there in a certain way in SharePoint Server. And this was this notion that SharePoint's always had its own search experience, which people kind of really thought was more around just individual documents that you could find across the different site collections and sites that live inside of SharePoint. Now, what we've seen with people's employee directories is, from a successful perspective, is that really they need to be on the homepage, they need to be branded with a company, they need to use the specific terminology that the company's used to. Maybe they don't call it past projects, maybe it's got a different terminology within the organization, and being familiar with that terminology is really important for people. And again, much I just showed in my demo, there was a lot of missing photos there was a lot of people without job titles, and maybe the manager fields weren't correct, and so the information has to be up to date. But it also has to be very quick and easy to use, and it needs to be that visually appealing. And so a lot of the feedback we got was those out-of-the-box experience that we demonstrated through Outlook and OneDrive and Teams and Delve is that we can't achieve a lot of those things. And a lot of the time, people just want to see something more traditional that they maybe even print out still, or that allows them to kind of have that more Rolodex approach and has the information that they need the first sight without so much clicking. And so with that, what we actually did was we took the out-of-the-box experience through People Search, which you get with a standard search collection. And if you're in Office 365 and you go to your tenantname.sharepoint.com and just do / and search, you'll get here, because they're provisioned by default. In a SharePoint Server environment, you'd have to, in most cases, actually create this site collection using the Enterprise Search site collection. And this gives you a little bit out of the box that you might want to expect in terms of listing the people and their skills and their about me and their photos in this case. And I can do things like search for Justin here, and it's going to return me Justin, and even show me some of the documents. But the beauty of SharePoint Search is that because it's been around so long, it's very mature in the sense that there's an extensibility model for it. And what this means is that I can provide a different view to my search, very similar to what I've got here. And what you can see in this environment, for instance, is that there's a lot of information that is missing, but the value, if you've got a complete and up-to-date directory, is that this is super useful for people, and you can customize this. So for instance, inside of this experience, I can decide what columns are shown. I can decide what fonts I'm using, how big the profile photo is, how I lay this out. Like in this instance, I'm using it as a very simple table, and I've added this, excuse me, A to Z at the top. But I could even have additional search boxes on here, for instance, that would give me the ability just to say, plug into this box the skills you're looking for, and it will filter my results by the people's skills. And so this is really kind of a nice tailored way of handling this within your organization. And the way that we've kind of decided to tackle this is we provided a free 70-page PDF guide, and don't be frightened by the 70 pages. If I had an hour webinar right now, I'd actually walk through kind of deploying this with you in essentially about 5 to 10 minutes. Most of our customers come back said, and they were really happy with this after 30 minutes of following the steps by steps in deploying this into their own environment. But I do have this all documented in terms of a bit more detail about what each of the employee directory experiences has, even down to where phonetic search works and where it doesn't, and how you can do refiners in what products and where you can't. But then the steps also go into additional details where, for instance, if I just scroll up here, that we can even go through and change the display templates and add additional properties like cost code. And in the walkthrough in this PDF, we actually show you how to do that and how to add additional sorting and refiners on the left-hand side. So maybe you don't want to do it by skills and past projects. You might just want to have your department and job titles on the left-hand side. So for instance, I could just show me all of the people that are the CTO of the company, which will obviously only be one in this case. But the refiners help me to kind of show everyone it's in help desk, for instance. And so this is super useful if you want to try and get something a bit more advanced than what you can have out of the box, but also just to understand where all these things are. And then a lot of this is collaborated on from other MVPs that have blogged about this in the past too. So if you are interested in kind of looking at that guide, please go check out hyperfish.com/employee-directory-signup. The guide is free, and the zip file that contains the display templates you need to upload to your master page to get this kind of standard fill is there. But there are some open source display templates in the zip as well that you can choose different looks and fills as well, if you're interested in that. And so I hope this was useful in terms of understanding kind of what's out of the box from an employee directory search across the different product experiences and where the future of that's going. But then also from this aspect of some of the ways you can customize this experience by collecting additional profile data, and then having that ability to brand your employee directory using that guide to take advantage of SharePoint Search and the people search aspects of that. So if I just open up the Q&A just to see if there's any questions, please feel free to type them in to the screen here, and I'll address those by talking to everyone back from the text written answers or questions that you have.
Okay, great.
So Julia, are there any questions there?
Yeah, we do have a couple questions. Please insert your questions in the question window and we will get those to Jeremy. The first question is, what are the differences between people search in SharePoint Online and SharePoint on-premises?
Yeah, good question. So there are a few limitations that are in SharePoint Server Search that are not in SharePoint Online. And the reason for that is primarily because Microsoft are running a multi-tenant service of multiple instances of SharePoint in the cloud. And there was a few features that were available in SharePoint Server leveraging the FAST technology that was acquired when they bought the FAST company a while back now in 2013 days, I guess, which were kind of built into the SharePoint experience. And so there are some advanced pipeline things you can do, which more often than not were really more for the files searching than they were for people search. But it did, for instance, allow you to very easily say, okay, well, we've got a bunch of external users information that lives in a SharePoint list or maybe in a database somewhere, and that we want to have those results return just like our employees' results that live in AD directly inside the employee directory. And so that's something that is definitely a differentiator if you are in SharePoint Server still, where you can take advantage of the extensibility of and the scalability of what's available with SharePoint Search on premises that you can't do in SharePoint Online. The other one is that with Azure Active Directory, you can't actually create additional attributes on a user's profile like you can in Active Directory on premises. And so when you want to create, say, a cost center code piece of information to store against a user's profile, you would need to use SharePoint user profile properties in the online way, much like how I explained in this diagram here. You'd want to make sure that you were storing the additional properties here, but in on-premises, you could actually just store them as additional AD properties here. And the beauty of that is that if there's other systems within your organization that connects to AD, they'll see that property information. Whereas if it is inside SharePoint user profiles, it's probably unlikely that those users actually, or those products are connected into the user profiles in SharePoint.
Okay, great. Someone has a question as to if this is a free version that you showed or a paid version.
No, so everything I've showed here is free. So the demos that I did of the out-of-the-box products is essentially available to everyone with Office 365, no matter what license. That guide, which I showed you, the PDF, is a free download. You just need to go to that sign-up page to get that, and the zip file is available for free as well. The reason we did it for free was there was a bunch of MVPs that are good friends of mine, like Mark Anderson and Stacey Deer and Tom Daly and Michael Svensson, that have kind of been in the SharePoint blogging space for a long time, like myself, that had blogs that kind of tackled all this, but it didn't tell a cohesive story. And so I reached out to them all and we built this PDF together, which kind of glued all that together as one story. And so we decided to just kind of provide this for free in a format based on all those contributions over the years by those MVPs. And so that's all totally free to kind of download right now.
Okay, we have another question coming through. What if there is a useful profile information in an HR system? Is it possible to connect to them?
Yeah, so there may be a scenario where the information isn't in Active Directory. For instance, there are customers that we've talked to that have their HRMS system up to date. Workday is a very popular one right now in the cloud, but more traditionally that might be PeopleSoft or an Oracle type approach or SAP kind of legacy approach. And in that instance, there might be some identity management software that syncs that HR information into Active Directory. But with our Hyperfish paid product, we actually have the ability that we can kind of keep that information in sync across the different systems, so that when in Office 365, when Hyperfish updates maybe a job title or an office location, it'll update AD as well as updating the HRMS system. And so therefore, when you're in your contact cards in Outlook or OneDrive or Teams, that information will show correctly, and you don't have to go just to the HR system to find this information. And so that's definitely a challenge right now, that out of the box, you really can't do this, and that you would need to kind of maybe reach out to us to talk to us about our products that help kind of get that data in all of the systems and keep them up to date by chasing those users that are missing information or that maybe their information is incorrect.
Okay, great. There is one more question. I know we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to get this one in. You mentioned something about a WhoBot in Microsoft Teams. When do you think that will be available?
Yeah, so it is actually available. The Microsoft Teams bot was announced as part of it's very subtle, as part of the announcements in that store. So when you go over to the store there, as long as you've got the latest version of Microsoft Teams, where if you're in the web, that's going to work. If you're in the app on your phone or on your desktop, you'll need to download the latest version to get the store to show up. And you'll see the WhoBot that appears here like that. And then once you've installed that there, that will show up as an app in this ... But also you can chat to it directly up the top here, like you would a normal human being. Or even if I'm inside of my command bar, which is new too, I can start to ask the questions to the WhoBot there too. And that's going to kind of go through and list those things as well. So that's, oh, sorry, it's / not /. That's why that didn't work. So you can see I'm kind of loaded into who now, and who is Aaron would allow me to ask who is Aaron, and it's going to respond those things in there. So yeah, so the WhoBot is available now inside of Microsoft Teams in Office 365.
Okay, great. That is all the questions that we have today. We will be sending out this link for the employee directory sign up. We also will be sending out the link to the recording after the webinar. Thank you, Jeremy, so much for the great presentation today. Lots of great information.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for the time, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
All right, we will see you next week where we talk about Office 365 security breaches. Have a great day, everyone.